Yeah.
So basically, regarding announcements that was coming out tonight, people want to talk about support in terms of jobs and business. Again, following on from last time, what news or what update have we got, Feargal or Colm? Feargal, do you want to start off?
Yeah, well, I suppose the two very significant things that the last evening, Cathal, you had a number of self-employed coming on and asking what were the supports for them, and you have the Chancellor today announcing at 5 o'clock what he's proposing, and what he's proposing is that he's willing to give a grant to them based on their average monthly profits for the last 3 years, up to £2,500. Now, what does that really mean? Well, I suppose what that means is that, let's say you had annual profits for the last 3 years of 10,000, say uh, 14,000, and then 12,000. So the three put together is 36,000 profits for the 3 years. You divide by three, so the average annual profits is 12,000. So your average monthly profit is then 1,000. And in that situation, you would get an 80% grant, which is £800. Now, there are restrictions. You have to have your 2018-2019 tax return submitted, and that in normal circumstances was expected to be submitted before the 31st of January passed, and he's extended that by 4 weeks. Now,
Right.
your main activity must be your self-employed trading activity, and also your self-employed earnings must be less than average of £50,000 over the last 3 years. Now, there are further, it's fair to say, complications with it. He's hinted that these grants will not be available until June. Now, that's
Right.
very tough for somebody self-employed, but he's tying that into the fact that he's extending the opportunity for people who had not submitted their tax returns. He's extending the date now by 4 weeks. He's giving people 4 weeks to put their tax return in. The other news today was that the small grant, if you remember, to all businesses based on the rateable value. You remember we talked about the net annual value last night or earlier on the week, and what that is, I explained then, that's the rentable value that appears on your rates bill. And what happened there was that what that has opened today. Actually, the good news with that is the Northern Ireland Executive are saying that as and from the 31st of March, they believe payments of that grant will start. And obviously, everybody won't get them on 31st of March, but to be fair, then that's encouraging. That they expect you can log on today in the portal, which is NI.gov, but from that they expect the first payments of the grant to be with effect from the 31st of March.
So starting off, like Colm, can I just turn to you? Can you give an indication of what way this COVID-19 has affected business in the Newry area? Just give us a summary or some ideas without actually naming businesses.
It's had a significant impact from businesses that are small right through to the larger businesses where we've seen announcements of redundancies. And I think what the Chancellor's package, particularly the job retention scheme, the 80% grant, is trying to encourage businesses to avoid the redundancy route and to lay people off on a temporary basis so that they can benefit from the 80% grant. One of the issues, and Feargal might touch upon it as well, is the issue of cash flow, that a lot of smaller businesses, while they're keen to avail of the 80% grant towards jobs up to 2,500 a month, don't have the cash flow to pay that now, because the Chancellor has said that the HMRC won't have a system in place to claim the grant until probably the end of April. And that's one of the bigger issues that the Chamber is facing from businesses at this point in time. The advice from government is that businesses can use the loan scheme that is out there at the moment, the interest-free loan scheme. But again, businesses are nervous about that, and it also brings some complications because some banks are looking for personal guarantees around that. So it's had quite a significant impact for businesses right across the greater Newry area.
That's brilliant. So in terms of information, so in terms now, Feargal, going back to this again, let's start off with the people that are now finding themselves as such told to stay at home. I know you talked the last day that it's a word called furlough if sorry, if that's what's chose to be. So can you sort of cover that again and give a recap and about number one, about this 80% potential payment and what they have to do with it. And then if you after that, if you touch on the mortgage relief and stuff like that, if possible. So just start off with, I'm now told that I have to stay at home and I work for a company.
Well, I think you have to start off, unfortunately, from the company perspective that the employees aren't able to work anymore. And what happens is the company has a potential opportunity to designate you a furlough worker. Now, the company must get your agreement, by the way, to designate you a furlough worker, and then they'll issue actually a letter confirming that, and you will sign it. A furlough worker basically is someone who is temporarily laid off, not made redundant, but cannot work. So you cannot work at the same time you're a furlough worker. The whole point is to facilitate you staying at home. So some companies may well have to choose to furlough some of their workers and indeed decide not to furlough other of their workers because they may well be continuing in business in some form or some scale. Next, it's fair to say that it's important to appreciate to qualify as a furlough worker, you have to be on the payroll in February past. So if you became a new employee of the company in March this month, you will not
Yeah.
qualify as a furlough worker. However, if the company made you redundant since the 1st of March, they can re-employ you as a furlough worker.
Okay.
And the limit, as Colin already said earlier, is gross of £2,500. So that means basically that if you're up to a maximum of £2,500, if your gross salary is £2,500, the government will give your employer a grant of 80%. Your employer then can choose, and this is part of the discussion with you. He can choose or she can choose to either increase your furlough salary up to the entire 100%, pay you the extra 20%, or pay you the 80%. Now, it's also fair to say the column highlighted a very key point, which is cash flow. And the point column was highlighting was that under this scheme, take, for example, employees being paid now at the end of March, their employer most likely would not be reimbursed for that until the end of April. So that is a major challenge for
Excuse me.
business. And that's why the government is suggesting that businesses should benefit from the business interruption loan scheme. Now, again, there are conditions around that, but the simple thing is what that is about is that you look at your cash flow immediately and you probably look at it for the next 12 months. And you identify, is there short-term working capital that you need to keep your business going when it restarts again? And obviously, not being able to pay your employees for a month because you don't have the money would be one of those reasons. And you then make a bank proposal to your bank, a cash flow proposal seeking extra money. The government has implied that for a 12-month period, that loan, sorry, I think it's for a 6-month period, the loan will be interest free. And they've also implied that that loan will become repayable over 6 years. Or alternatively, if you happen to use invoice discounting, which is a technical thing, re the financing of debtors, it's repaid over 3 years. And then move on. You mentioned to me Cahill Mortgage. The
Yeah.
situation in mortgages, I covered it the last day, and I think this is really important because I heard somebody today making a comment, which I can tell you I'd be very worried about. You cannot cancel your mortgage without getting, by the way, the word is not cancel, the word is defer, but you cannot defer the payment of your mortgage without getting the agreement of your mortgage provider. So it's
Right.
very important. Now, the rule of thumb is that most mortgage providers are actually offering what's called a 3-month holiday deferment. And then what happens is what you were due to pay in both capital and interest over that 3-month period, you repay over the remaining period of your mortgage. And remember, we covered that quite well the last evening. But just to clarify, as I said, redirect debits also, please don't ring your bank and say, cancel all my direct debits. That would not be a wise decision. You need to look at each direct debit and see, first of all, do you need it when the business gets up and going again? And secondly, for example, in the case of HP agreements, could you ring the HP provider and get potentially a deferment holiday?
Cahill, could I maybe just add
Yes, Colin.
one further point? I mean, we've been putting out a lot of advice on what's available from government, but the other very simple piece of advice is that most businesses have an accountant that they look to for advice. and that should be the first call. Call your accountant, as Feargal has given a very detailed explanation of the meaning behind a lot of these schemes. Ring your accountant, and it could save you a lot of money.
And there is a limit there, isn't that right, Feargal?
Yeah, there is a limit, but Carol, even more important, one could go to any of these schemes too hasty, and these could be very expensive mistakes in 3 or 6 or 9 months' time, because actually all these schemes, in hindsight, very clearly will be subject to due diligence. And what I'm saying is that my advice very strongly would be to pause, think it over, look at the implications for your business, speak to your accountant or indeed your legal advisor in some cases where it will be an employment legal advisor be required in terms of the employment contracts, etc. And certainly there is help out there. Without doubt, there is help, but it's very important you take time to consider it and consult your professional advisors.
Yeah, but when you talk about that, Feargal, for a small business, if I picked up right there, that's under 15,000 NAV, that's straightforward and the government should pay that. What you're talking about, being very careful about and about holding back on is the other grants or the other money available in terms of what the Chancellor announced tonight, say self-employed, because I think they said that you had to get your tax returns in, and also they would look at funding based on what, even as much if nobody had any books in from last year, even they'd look at it from this year. Where in terms you said have been very careful about moving forward?
Well, for example, the most positive one, to be honest, the two most positive ones is the VAT. The VAT is for the months of whatever it is, February, March, and April. The good news there is you don't have to do anything there. That's an automatic. So you don't have to notify anybody. You can just for your VAT. However, let's take PAYE and NIC. You're hearing people saying, I'm not paying it. That's correct. It won't be asked for, but you must notify. There are procedures you must go through here. You must notify HMRC to become what's called basically a time to pay arrangement. Similarly, there are people coming in and people in the construction industry will understand these terms. I don't want to bore, but things like CIS, etc. And there's a thing called gross payments. And the risk there is if you don't go through the correct procedure, you may then be deemed to be in default. And that has massive impacts once your business gets up and going again. So I wouldn't be afraid. I think there's good opportunities here, but just keep yourself well informed. Similarly, the rate relief from the Northern Ireland Executive, which is for all businesses, is extremely good, Carol. And that is available. And that is not a deferment. That's actually a grant for 3 months. That's your rates now. All business rates are being reduced by, in reality, 25% over the year, a 3-month period.
But effectively, all these announcements today to help are there, and people, whether small business or big business, can turn to their own accountant for advice. And what you're saying is do all that first, but they must still act hastily because there is limits to this. Isn't that correct?
Oh yeah,
there's time limits, time frames.
Well,
yeah, Colin.
The main reason is cash flow. They have to act hastily.
Yeah.
No, I would take for what Feargal has said is correct. I mean, thoroughly research it. We have lots of information on our social media channels about all the different schemes. So, I mean, businesses don't have to trawl through different websites. We have it there. Consider what's relevant for your business and make sure you act appropriately. Like the key thing of the Fairlock scheme is your workers cannot work for you. So it's not a case of laying them off this week, bringing them back in next week, and then back off again the following week. You know, that would have consequences for you as HMRC police this scheme. So just make sure that you thoroughly investigate it, see what's right for your business, and take advice.
Like the indications are, Cathal, for example, you have to be a furloughed worker for 3 weeks. Now, secondly, I must say we do have a number of clients, by the way, who actually have some workers who are furloughed and others who are not. And that's also an important consideration. That's because of what they believe will be the reduced down operations, what skills or staff are required to service those.
Okay, and this here question here, I assume, does anybody know about that? That's the, what is that, the European Social Fund? Anybody know anything about this? Liz?
Well, it depends. It's a very big issue, the European Social Fund.
Yeah.
Depends what the question is, Carl.
That's all that was put up there, and then somebody said one about asking the same. So I don't know, I have enough knowledge on it myself to know anything about it. So,
no,
of course, jump in anytime, any of you.
Yeah, listen, I just want to thank. I think that last 5 minutes there from Fergie has been incredible advice that a lot of people because he breaks it down in layman's terms and layman's words that people can understand what's coming down the track in relation to their businesses. And, I certainly was a wee bit confused about this four-lock worker situation.
Yeah.
I was talking to a businessman yesterday who was adamant that the whole company basically had to go into deep freeze. You couldn't actually decrease your workforce and put some in and some out. So Fergie was quite clear on that actually is possible to do that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
just to clarify, sorry, Charles, in the context that you're acting within the public health guidelines. For example, there are some businesses now currently which must close because they're being advised that they can't trade or whatever, but there are other businesses who are working remotely, and some of their workers will be required and others won't be.
Well, what about Fergie? What about in the case of, say, a construction company with 25 employees, and they're basically just sort of downgrading and slowing down just because business has basically ground to a halt. In a case like that, are they able to put, for example, 15 workers into the four-lock worker scheme and keep another 10 on as normal?
The answer to that is yes, they are, but they would have to, and this is where I come back to, Charles, it's quite tricky. They would have to show in case one of the workers who wasn't furloughed or in term, equally one of the workers who was furloughed, that they would think they're being fairly treated. So the firm would have to give the rationale. And you picked a sector which, believe it or not, is quite difficult. And the Construction Employers Federation here in the North issued a statement actually in terms of advice to the construction sector at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. We happen to be a patron to that, so that's how I know about it. But construction is quite tricky now, because what's happening in construction is if you're working on what's deemed an essential site, for example, you're working in a hospital, you can continue. But in Northern Ireland, if you're not, then there's restrictions on what you can do. In the south of Ireland, there are still quite a significant number of construction sites open.
Does that answer your question, Jarlath?
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Colin, have you anything to add into that?
No, just I suppose what we've been calling for is HMRC to publish the guidelines on the scheme and to get it up and running as quickly as possible. And that'll deal with a lot of queries that businesses have, because I mean, I've heard stories like what Jarlath has talked about, where people think it has to be the whole business, when, as Feargal has explained, it doesn't. So the sooner the guidelines are published by government, the better. And as soon as the money is available, that'll ease the pressure on local businesses as well. You asked earlier about the impact on the business world. I mean, the fact that people are now working from homes, the fact that we're now using video conferencing much more, I think the larger organizations will begin to question, do they need large office blocks with lots of people in them?
You're right.
Can it be done remotely, or can it be done through a series of hubs? Indeed, it's probably better to keep some of your staff separated from a health point of view. But I suppose one downside is it could have a further impact on the high street, that more and more people see the value of shopping online, and that will have an impact on the high street. Although, as Liam said, the local shop has come to the fore, and people are more comfortable with that. We use a local shop here to get a lot of our stuff, because there aren't the same queues, and it seems to be reasonably well stocked. So we could see those impacts on the business world whenever we get out of this.
So Feargal, you want to come in there, Feargal, and just say something as well on that?
Yeah, I think that there is no doubt that when business gets up and running again, and hopefully it won't be too long, but health has to be the first priority. I think you will see changes, and I think business will adapt. And I think you will certainly see a lot more use of technology. And I think the reason why many businesses have been able to deal with this has been they have been investing significantly in technology. Over the last, take our own business, for example, if somebody said to me 3 years ago that we were all operating remotely for 2 or 3 weeks, I'd have laughed at them. But the reality is, we have been operating remotely for the last 2 or 3 weeks, not because of coronavirus, to be fair. Coronavirus brought it to a head, but because there was significant investments, and many businesses have been investing, as Colin would know, through technology. And I think what Liam is saying is correct. I think you're going to see a lot of people doing soul searching and saying, do I really need to sit in the car, or do I need to sit on the plane, or go to meetings? Can I do a lot of it without a lot of the traveling we're doing?